in terms of this, welcome, thank you for joining, a key topic. And we're going to focus in on this. I've done things on this before, but I've also been through some of the research. There's been some recent research that's been shared from the CIPD. They've got their survey of 2023, and also some research by Oxford University. So I'd touch on that as well, hence the idea of rethinking it. If you are new to Actus, so Actus, we provide performance management software. We also have talent management, learning management, compliance, 360 feedback, and I also personally do quite a lot of training and consultancy. So please bear us in mind should you have any projects along that sort of nature. So as I was alluding to before, I've updated because I always like to, when we do these topics and revisit them, see what's most current. So I have gone into updating the 2023 CIPD wellbeing findings. It's interesting, actually. I've just recorded a podcast on with the person who set up the CIPD professional roadmap, the professional map. And one of the things that they said about wellbeing is it was an area of HR that now they treat it as an area in its own right. So it used to be a sort of a sub area of maybe engagement or something like that, but it's now something, it has its own section in their profession map, which I thought was interesting in its own right. And that's where I got thinking and got some of this information in here. We'll also look at how can we apply wellbeing and resilience strategies personally, and because predominantly I'm imagining we have an HR audience and I can see other familiar faces coming in, then we'll look at how we can address it to ourselves, but also the people that we support. And actually that's a really one thing that I like to do is just give you the chance to, quite a few of you on the call, just pop in the chat, say hello, let me know what your role is, and do you have a specific wellbeing role, HR? What is your interest in this topic? Personal, professional, a bit of both. And you say, are you an HR person, OD person? Do you have a specific wellbeing role? Let us know what your thinking is here in terms of this. Welcome to those who are just joining through, just doing brief introductions in the chat. And the other reason I like to do that, if you are new to a webinar with me, which I think quite a lot of you are not, we do like to make it a little bit interactive. So it's always good to give you a chance to say hello in the chat. Quite often I find that people share ideas or links in the chat that benefit everyone. And it's a good way of networking. We've had people network off the back of it. So Rebecca has a wellbeing and sustainability manager. So you are probably an expert, Rebecca. I'm interested to see some of your answers here. And Shanda, your rewards in HR, and I guess, does wellbeing sit under reward? Quite often is the case. Hi Claire, lovely to have you with us again. I won't say hello to everybody, don't worry. Okay, so I'm going to let those carry on up here. So these are our wellbeing findings. I'm letting you go in because I know that my next slide is actually a poll. So I don't want to ask you to do too many things at once. So while those chats are coming through, I'm also going to ask you to respond to a couple of questions in a poll, which also gives us some other data as to what our interests are and actually where we think we want to focus this year. And it's great for you guys to see what your colleagues or others want to do in this sort of situation, you know, whether or not your organisation is representative or looking at things differently. So I'm also launching a poll, so I'm hoping that you can see that, and it should have two questions in it. It should say, the first one is, how important is wellbeing? And when I'm saying how important in your organisation, if you were to go to senior managers or the board, how important would they consider it to be? And I guess it might be relative to previous years. We're no longer in COVID, but is it something, where is it? Is it highly important, important? And feel free to put context in the chat. And you can enter multiple choice in the where do you plan to focus. So are you looking at specific areas? Where are you focusing? Or where do you think, if you're looking at this strategically, you want to focus for this? Agree with you, Richard. The cornerstone of employee performance, absolutely. Okay, fabulous. Great. Okay, so do keep on completing those. You've got a chance to respond. Oh, actually, that's great numbers. We've got almost 96% on the bottom one. have responded. So I'll count down, I'm going to share the poll. So if anyone else wants to answer on the poll, brilliant response rates. Let me end it and share it, and then you can see. So that should be sharing for you. So I suppose, unsurprisingly, you're all very interested in the topic, and it's seen as highly important in your organisation. Interesting that the number is 67%. I'll come back to you as why in a moment. And that's highly important. And it looks like a real range of wellness that you guys are looking at. So you're looking across the whole realm there, which is interesting. So I guess you may well be ahead of some of the information I'm going to share myself, because it looks like you're right on message there. Okay, so in terms of this, there are some criticisms. Are any of you aware of the criticisms that have been recently? There was an article in The Guardian recently criticising wellbeing initiatives. And also there's an article, I was getting Naden, who I had on the podcast recently, he works for Benefax, which I think they do benefits and other wellbeing things. He was sort of defending some of the stuff there. So I'm interested if any of you seen any of the criticism that has been levelled at these things recently. Let me know in the chat, but let me just share what I'm referring to. So the challenge is, I suppose, we often get into these points where we go, right, wellbeing, I'm going to do wellbeing. I can see that I'm preaching to the choir here, because you are all looking at wellbeing from a really general point of view based on the poll results that we just put up there. But quite often people could be seen as going, okay, wellbeing, what we're going to do is we're going to give everybody access to a wellbeing, a mindfulness app, and encourage people to go for a walk or do a fitness tracker or whatever it might be. So something relatively light touch, and they think that that's going to do the job. And the reality is, an Oxford University, and it's a really large study, thousands of people were involved in it, found no statistical impact on wellbeing or job satisfaction from interventions, these sort of more interventions. Similarly, a US study, they did like a 3-year study on people, and they were doing exercise type, diet type interventions, and they found there was no significant difference after 18 months of those two types, which is interesting, because if you go and look at, if you don't do a Google on it, lots of American companies probably who promote wellness apps and stuff are sort of saying, oh, you get a return of $3 to the dollar of every amount you spend on it. So, you know, damn lies and statistics, there's all of that out there. But as I can see here, no, intercontinental personal topics, no, I don't think so, Carol. Yeah, Harriet's referring to exactly. So Harriet's saying that basically the learnings from the study were it doesn't matter, you can't fix fundamental stressors. If people are worried about their job security, financial security, if they've got a terrible manager, if they feel they've got no flexibility or empowerment in their job, you're not going to fix that with some free yoga, basically. And I don't suppose that's going to surprise any of us. So it's thinking holistically about what we need to do to, I guess, get to the root causes that may cause people to be stressed. So it's looking at removing stressors in order to help people be better. Now, that's not to say that you're not going to get benefit from a bit of yoga or whatever it is, but that on its own is not going to solve it if you have an excessive workload. So it's absolutely looking at the structural aspects of work that cause stress. I mean, they did a survey in the NHS. I'm not seeing anyone here who's NHS. We do have quite a lot of contacts in the NHS. You can imagine that endless bureaucracy, it's things like that, systems that are not needed, managers that are unsupportive. Those are things that create ongoing stress, which absolutely is going to affect someone's well-being at work. So we know the main point here is we mustn't be superficial about it. It isn't something that just a simple initiative or throwing a bit of money. And actually, yeah, throwing a bit of money or a lot of money isn't necessarily going to fix it. You've got to think a bit more deeply about it. And then looking at the wellbeing report, so the CIPD wellbeing report that you can download, was out in October, I think it was last year. There is a few things that they identified. And of course, this is off the back of us being through a pandemic. And quite interestingly, almost a bit like school exam results, you can see that things are generally going back to where they were 5 years ago, except some key areas. So there's more sickness absence from 2019. So the average days was 7.8 from 5.8 days. And that was the average across all of the people that they surveyed. If you looked at public sector, it's more like 10.6. So it's much higher numbers of things. They did say that 53% of businesses do have a standalone wellbeing strategy, and 69%. So when I said on the poll you had 67%, reported wellbeing is something that was important to senior leaders. So we would be representative, I guess, in terms of 67% of you said very important, and a high proportion said important. They said that what people needed to do, or what there was starting to be, was more of a proactive focus on wellbeing rather than reactive. So if we think about in 2019, or when I was last in an organisation, which is longer than that ago, it would be more like if someone's got a problem, referring them to occupational health. And this is more about prevention, and that would seem to be more sensible. Mental health is the most common focus area for things in terms of that. And I guess there is much increased focus on mental health generally, I think, of all of us in the last 5 to 10 years. But the challenge, lack of line manager skills / confidence in dealing with it, is the top challenge. Harriet, thank you for your comments. I will absolutely look at those. I need to digest them to be able to respond properly. So I'll come back to that in a moment. In terms of the views of the workers, there's a little bit of a nod to people feeling a bit fatigued, maybe. Workers are starting to see stuff as more transactional. Maybe they're not getting the extra, they're not being as energized by their work. Now, that is an interesting thing from an employer point of view. I mean, some of us are working from home all the time. Is that related to not having social interaction? Is it a throwback to the stresses and strains of things, or has something fundamentally changed about our psychological contract in terms of how engaged we feel to work? And if it has, why is that? And certainly I think if you're not going into a place of work as frequently as you were, does that affect your sense of belonging? So line managers, who we know line managers had massive challenges to keep people feeling engaged back in 2019, if they were coming into the workplace every day. If all of your people are remote or they're hybrid and you're seeing them occasionally and you're working on different days, is that having an impact? I mean, I don't know the answer to this, but you could imagine that it is. I mean, I'm interested in you guys. We've got quite a population on here. Do you see that in terms of, is the sense of belonging and involvement and sense of association with the organisation reduced? And would you see that as related to where people are in terms of workplace? I haven't got a poll for that, so tell me what you think on that one. I'm just having a look here. Well, yeah, so exactly that point, Harriet. We're making the same point there, aren't we? And I don't know. I think it might have, personally. Job quality seemed to regress in some ways. I wasn't so sure what they were saying in terms of that, but people's sense of enjoyment and fulfill from it. However, flexible working has definitely provided opportunities where people are feeling more empowered. So that whole sense of, I suppose it is normalized, but for, let's say, someone a working parent, or people being able to fit exercise into their life, these sort of things, by taking out commutes in certain areas, there's definitely the flexible working aspect, whether it's about being able to exercise and remove stress, or being able to reduce home stresses for some people and having more autonomy and control over how they spend their time, i.e. not spending, I don't know, 3 hours a day commuting. Those are upsides. But does that in turn make people less associated with work? I don't know. I'll keep an eye on the chat there. I'm interested in your views here. So I then went on just to think, what about ROI? So where are we going to get an ROI? Because it isn't that simple as with any of those things. It's the same with engagement. It's correlational. You can't guarantee it's causal. And it's not a simple cause and effect approach. But in terms of wellbeing initiatives, and whether they are systemic or more strategic or otherwise, where you're going to get your benefits, it's probably more through morale and engagement. So it comes back to engagement, people feeling a sense of belonging, people feeling they want to go the extra mile, people feeling they're getting valued. Remember, lots and lots of engagement Scores relate to how line managers behave. Most of them, if you look at the Gallup Q12 scores, I think about 7 or 8 of them are directly affected by the line manager. If we see that well-being links there, you can see again, it comes right back to, are line managers up to it? Are they looking after their own well-being? Are they supporting the well-being of others in a proactive way as opposed to a transactional way? Other ways in which people have an ROI, well, people feeling they've got a better work-life balance. Does that mean that they're less likely to be sick? Does that mean that they're more likely to stay? Does that mean you've got a more inclusive culture when we think about well-being from a more broad point of view as to people feeling they have a sense of belonging? And that whole sort of thing about employer brand and values, quite an intangible thing, but you know, flexible, that sort of a sense of well-being, feeling supported in your well-being, the company cares about you. You know, that is something that's quite intangible, but really valuable, hard to put your numbers on it. So I think the thing is, what I would say, and what I can see from the research is, maybe if you are, as a number of you are obviously looking at wellbeing, maybe you already do track it. And again, please tell me how you do track it. There are people here who are more expert than me because you've got wellbeing in your title. But I wonder, would you, I think if I was in a job now doing it, I would look, presumably many companies have got some sort of survey. I would probably want to track certain questions, or make sure there were some questions in my survey that track the things that I feel are important. And it will be, some of it's, you know, how do people feel in terms of overall wellness, but do they feel supported in their wellness at work? Do they feel stressed? So looking at these things that we know drive wellness or not, it's not just about, do I like to use the yoga app or appreciate the fact we have free fruit when I go to the office on a Wednesday? It's about actually more fundamental things that cause stress. So does your survey get at those aspects? And if it doesn't, maybe it should. And if it does, maybe looking at those questions. So I think that's what I would do if I was in that sort of situation, is look at specifically whatever the survey is that I'm using and get some data points that you could then track. And that's going to be the best way, in my opinion, to track an ROI on anything you're doing personally in wellbeing. So in terms of the sort of things to rethink, if you like, in terms of this, it's absolutely about stressors. So stress management, it is about so preventing stressors, not superficially managing stress as in deep breathing, although that's useful, but it's about looking at what's causing people stress. It is about making sure managers are trained in terms of spotting signs of stress, maybe not overloading people or being sensitive to people's position. It's about making sure that we do have psychological safety. People feel that they can speak up, that they're valued, that they're not going to be targeted, that people have a sense of belonging with the organisation. And even more so, how do we make that happen if people are remote? It's about giving people a voice, so that sense of morale and team working. Also about making sure that work is good, so that people feel fulfilled in their job, they've got decent job design, they get that work-life balance and flexible working. And then, of course, all the fundamental things. So there's only so much you can do about it, but you can support it. So, you know, health insurance is interesting. A lot of the stats are American, and of course, it's slightly different over there in terms of you have a direct link. But, you know, health insurance in terms of supporting people's physical health, supporting people's personal growth and development, financial well-being. There was a massive lift up, unsurprisingly, I think about 16% in terms of people's fears financially. Depends what sort of company you work for, but you know, people on zero contract hours, what are they called? Hours where people where they don't know when their shifts are going to be, or they don't know how many hours they're going to get. That's a huge stressor, even more so at the moment financially for people. So if you're in a retail or a manufacturing environment where that is the case, can you do more about that to give people certainty? Because that ties into the whole financial well-being. And good lifestyle choices. So it's holistic, but actually to a degree, those are in an order, maybe not the financial should be higher up there, of things we can think about. Have many of you done anything on specific on financial well-being? Is that something that's consistent for you guys in terms of something that perhaps prior to the inflation going through the roof a couple of years ago? Is there anything there that you guys have decided to do? I'm just going to have a quick look through the comments. So Rebecca, you're saying sometimes actually having to work in the office causes stress when people have got the hang of how to work at home. It is interesting, isn't it? Especially when you've got, I'm set up now, I have 3 monitors and my seat's perfect and all those sort of things. So if I went and had to sit at a hot desk, I would not be comfortable, be hunched up. It's not straightforward to go and just work somewhere in terms of that. Oh, interesting, Steve. I haven't seen that. 2022 Work Trend Index. Employees have a new worth it equation. So 53% of employees are more likely to prioritise health and well-being over work than before the pandemic. And so it'd be interesting what that is relatively, what they were prior, isn't it? Because it's kind of or what they say. I don't understand the context of that, but that's an interesting one. I'll have to go and look that one up. Yes, so it is. It's again, it's personal. So Elise is saying that, and so is Claire. Some people, it's better for them to have the delineation between work and home. Financial stresses, absolutely. So you've got lots of them, have you, Shandus? Okay, so it depends on. Okay, it depends on what you're doing. So let me go and put the sorts of things that people are putting up. And I have done a podcast. I've done 2 podcasts on this actually. Try and we'll send them out on the links. I did one with Charles Cotton of the CIPD on financial well-being. But certainly up to date now, so people, over half of respondents, and this is the CIPD survey, said they were struggling to keep up with bills and commitments, and 16% had severe financial distress, and obviously lower paid and skilled workers. Sorry, that should be lower paid and unskilled workers are more at risk. So 50% more, 57% of companies compared to 44% in 2022 were promoting it, considering hardship loans. So that's something that a company can practically do. Employee benefits that might reduce living costs and financial debt education. And I think that's the challenge. Okay, so some of you are doing things on this, which is helpful. All right, so now I'm going to move more into more personalized things, thinking about ourselves. I quite often ask, how are you doing in yourself? I haven't done this for, I don't want to over poll you today, but you know, if you think about yourself, I know we've got a predominantly HR audience on here. I always think it's hilarious that the episodes that I've done on the podcast that are related to our own well-being are always way less listened to than things like managing underperformance and sort of more hard, tangible things. So I think it often is a case of, you know, us putting ourselves last at the bottom of the pile, and the adage, should we be putting our own oxygen mask on first? What are we doing to look after our own health and well-being and happiness? Role modeling, at the end of the day, it is key there to do. But it's quite key for us to making sure that we are being proactive. Also, just even taking steps to feel like you're looking after your own well-being can help us to feel like we're in charge, taking control of pressure, and reduce the fact we've got stress. We need to build resilience. It's a bit like a muscle resilience. So this is about us being able to bounce back, because we know there's going to be turmoil coming. And I think at this time of the year, it's often harder than others because you feel just a bit more worn down potentially. So helping people to, I suppose, take responsibility. And that's one of the conversations I've had. I've had numerous wellbeing conversations with experts over the last sort of weeks, because I've been doing a theme on the podcast. And there is this piece here, is it's easy for us and for others almost to picture ourselves as victims. I haven't got time. My workload is such that I'm not going to have time to look after me now. But is it a personal responsibility? Is there something, do we all need to think about our level of personal responsibility to look after ourselves, reduce stresses, address the shape of the work, do what we can that's in our control? And that's the key to look at. I mean, not all stress is bad. This pressure performance curve, I think, is quite interesting for people to look at, because actually the issue is, for many of us, is to work out when we're in optimum performance. And obviously, if you've got too little to do, or you feel like you're not performing, and you're not under pressure at all, then actually you're not going to perform very high. I think this is why they say give tasks to a busy person. Is that what it is in terms of that? Don't worry about that. Give it to a busy person, because actually boredom is a problem for people. You don't want to be bored. The comfort zone is when we're comfortable, it's a bit easy. And we're in that sort of stage. Can you hear a background noise on me? Is there a background noise coming through? No, great, thank you. And so optimum performance is when we are just moving out of our comfort zone. We're into stretch. So we're doing something that's challenging. We're learning something new. It's a little bit different, but it's not so much that it's pushing us into strain and overwhelm. And this is the thing, the challenge you've got though, is if you are permanently in stretch/strain, you don't realize, and this is when we're at risk of burnout. And people don't often see it. So it's just being really aware. And maybe this is the sort of thing that you need to train your managers in. Maybe this is something, take this pressure performance curve. Do they understand when they're talking to their people? Are you comfort zoning? Are you in stretch? If we took this extra piece of work up, is that going to put you into strain or otherwise? And it's about how can we help people to be optimum, so they're challenged, they're interested in terms of this, and that's great for them and it's good for the business. So having that whole idea of pressure performance, the problem is people sometimes go into this zone of delusion where they, think that they can just keep on going and keep on going and keep on running, and that's where there's risk of burnout and overwhelm. So, of course, opportunity for you to reflect on this yourself. Let me put a poll up for you. Let's go back so I can send that up. Where would you see yourselves in terms of the pressure performance curve? Don't worry, we can't see who's saying what, so it's say where you like. Okay, a couple more minutes, I'll share it with you. 75% participation. Anyone else want to choose their response? Oh, you're between two. Opt for one then, Rebecca. It doesn't matter which one you go for. Okay, I'm going to end it. That's an interesting one as well, actually. Thinking if you're between two, is that circumstantial? Is it some areas of your job that you find in one or the other? Interesting as to why that is. So most people here are in stretch, which is, in fact, this is almost a perfect bell curve. Unfortunately, sadly, there's quite a number of you who are feeling in overwhelm and strain. So 30% are in strain or overwhelm, which is quite dangerous from a point of view of burnout. So, I mean, this is the thing. What can you do? What do you need to do to make sure you're not stuck there, basically? What do you need to reflect on? What can you take control of? What's causing the strain and the overwhelm for you? And obviously we've looked at some of the things that it could be. We're people who work within businesses just like anyone else. So, is it about you're not feeling part of belonging? Is it about you're saying yes to everything? Is it something where you're not creating time for yourself outside of work? Is it financial wealth? What is it? Only you know. But the bottom line is 30% of you out there who are feeling in strain and overwhelm, you need to do something about that now. And think what it is that you can absolutely do, because it's so fundamental to your overall health, actually, your health, your well-being. But even just taking control can help you feel, even for something very small, can help you feel back in control of it and actually make things a little bit better. So what can you control today, tomorrow, that's going to help you feel a little bit less under pressure, rather than just getting up and getting on that treadmill and then getting off it and collapsing? So think about, what do you need to do? What do you need to recharge or renew? Some of you would have come across the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I was lucky enough to train on that in my 20s. In fact, Steve Thomas is on here, who I used to work with then, who came on it. And Stephen Covey talks about the habit of renewal, where it's all about how do we basically re-energize? Because it's a bit like, if you think about ourselves as a car, if you never ever get your car serviced or put petrol in it, ultimately it's going to break down. And that's the same as we are going to do. So do think about, what do I do to recharge, renew, and how can I prioritize that time? So the 4 quadrants, this is where I was slightly taking it from 7 habits and I've slightly adjusted it. So he talks about 4 quadrants. He talks about physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And I think a lot of you are UK based. Spiritual doesn't always land so well for HR. So I'm thinking it's more about holistic or mindful type resilience. If spiritual works for you, brilliant. So if you think about things physically, are you looking after yourself physically? Are you looking after yourself emotionally, mentally, holistically, and mindfully? Now, I appreciate this is more about our holistic well-being, but you can think about this in terms of work as well. So if, for example, you're feeling overloaded, which part of this is it affecting? What do you need to do to go? Who do you need to talk to address that in terms of your workload? So if we're to look at our physical well-being, what can you improve? I mean, these are rhetorical questions, but there's at least 30% of you who I'm sure you think about, but these are the sort of things we can all do more about, right? We never, you know, we're never perfect at these things. So typically, you know, are we eating well, really eating the rainbow? There's whole loads of evidence now about eating more plant-based. I just recently, well, I did it about a year ago, this Zoe thing, which is where you need to be eating, basically diversity is linked to your gut microbiome, which is linked to every aspect of your well-being, stress, immune system, all of those things. So diet is really, really key. Water, those sort of things. Are you getting enough sleep? Certainly there are things physically that can make a difference in terms of that, and exercise. So if you're exercising, you're more likely to sleep. So all of these things actually feed into each other. I guess if you're doing dry January, that's the sort of thing that often helps your sleep. If you're someone that knows that, you know, who regularly has a glass of wine in an evening or more, then that affects your sleep. So all of these things affect your physical well-being. So that's one aspect of it, physical. In terms of your emotional well-being, think about the people that you surround yourself with at home, at work. So if you're working from home, are you lonely? Or do you find it really stressful being, I don't know, you're in a shared household with other people who are playing computer games or something like that when you're not able to work in terms of that? Or what's it like in terms of your emotional well-being at work? What's the culture of the team that you work in and the people that you work with? Think about it. Are you surrounding yourself with radiators? You know, the radiators, the people that pick you up, that say, how are you doing? Who are just a pleasure to be around, or the people that sap your energy? And we all know both of those types. So how can you spend less time with drains and more time with radiators? Think about those things. Obviously, we're professional, we have to, and actually I think in HR you can end up with drains more than the average, because you may have to help people who wouldn't necessarily mean to be negative. But just think about, how are you recharging your emotional batteries? Then, of course, our mental well-being. So are you learning? Are you having an opportunity to learn and grow? So fair play to you coming on a webinar. So that's about learning and growing, isn't it? You're doing something here. Are you stimulating yourself? Are you stretching yourself? Are you giving yourself something do you do, I don't know, Duolingo or Sudoku or whatever it might be that's getting your brain cells firing? And if not, what could you do to do that? Or you know, losing yourself in a book that you really enjoy? And mindful or spiritual, what do I call it, holistic well-being. So this is more, if you follow a religion, then that works. Things like yoga or meditation becoming bigger areas here, about being present in the moment. It's the more sort of, I suppose, esoteric stuff that we don't always tangibly know, but stuff that makes you feel good. For me, I walk the dog every day. That works for me in terms of physical well-being, but just being outside with nature. So what is it, something like that, that recharges your batteries that you can do more of? So challenge to you, which in turn to challenge the people that you work with. What can you do in each of those 4 quadrants? Could you go off and do something that you're going to do for the next week or so, just to make sure you're recharging and your batteries in those quadrants? So my tips here are: take responsibility for your overall well-being, schedule those in. Exercise and things like that, you've got to get it in the diary, because otherwise something else will take it out. You know, what else can you do about your diet and sleep habits? Is there something where you can do more? Get your water on your desk and make sure you drink it. Think about, you know, your mindset. Is it being affected by negative people? Do you feel more negative? Or have you become a half empty person? Or can we go, right, the glass is half full. I'm so grateful for the fact that it's pouring with rain outside and my garden's going to get more water. I'm grateful for the fact that the temperature has gone up since last week. You know, what can we feel grateful about? There's so much to actually actually feel really grateful for when there's so many awful things going on in the world. But it's really easy for us to feel negative just about our we come to terms with our day-to-day, don't we? And it's really easy to take it for granted. The main thing though is focus on what you can control. So even if you feel a bit of overwhelm and there's lots of things that you can't control, focusing on one or two things that you can. So even if it is 5 minutes getting up from your desk and going and having a bit of fresh air, do things that make you feel that actually I achieved that today, that build that sense of confidence in yourself. Back in COVID, I remember this psychiatrist saying, if you can't control anything, the only thing you can control is tidying your sock drawer, then just tidy the hell out of your sock drawer, right? So when we're in overwhelm, we just focus on all the things that we can't do. So instead, okay, what can you do? However small, that's going to make you feel good. And that's the key thing to do. So how do we, what does it take to believe in the risk of overwhelm, says Harriet? How do you get people to recognize it? Do you know, Harriet, I actually don't know the answer to this one other than sort of salutary tales. I don't know if that's the right word. Because a number of people that I've had on the podcast and go, oh, I did this, and then I hit burnout. And people I've known who've actually who've gone into, out of action for a year because they're so severe, but they kind of they ignored it, and they don't see it coming. So how do you get someone to take it seriously? I think it's really, really hard. I would say everyone on this call, 30% of you are up for it. So everyone on this call, take it seriously, invest in this, but also life's much better when you're feeling a bit more in control and you feel well. But I think it's really hard. I don't know how you can influence people to believe it. I took this out of the slides, so I've done this before, but I had one which is the black hole. And I talk about my sister who had mental health issues. She's had various things, challenges there. And she would go to a psychiatrist. She had various CBT and stuff about dealing with her thinking, her patterns of thinking. And she had this situation where she had effectively fallen into the black hole, and she'd fallen into the first time. And then the analogy that the psychiatrist described to her was that anyone will fall in for once. They can, but you want to come out, but then the next time you get closer and closer to doing it. And the key is being able to see your danger of black hole, my analogy being overwhelmed, then being able to sort of navigate around it, take it seriously, and ultimately maybe steer away from them altogether. So I'm not sure how helpful that is, but I mean, lots of us have had depression or things like that. So in my 20s, really early 20s, I had depression. I remember it was weird. You have like thoughts popping into your mind that aren't your own. They're warning signs. So I suppose it's about people taking seriously warning signs. So if you're somebody that you're feeling lots of aches and pains, that's a warning sign about your body. If you're not sleeping well, that's potentially a warning sign. If you're not really feeling you're enjoying spending time with family and friends, that's a warning sign. How can we help other people? I suppose, what warning signs can we see in them? And if we link right back to the line manager, the classic is if someone's got a slight change in behavior, or marked change in behavior is more worrying, but maybe they're withdrawing, they're not acting the same as they would normally be. They normally would find fun from sort of team activities or crack a joke, but they're not. So those maybe would be the things where I think maybe that's not entirely answering, but how can we help people? Because I don't know they'll recognize it for themselves, particularly if they are in strain and they're so busy. If you remember what that curve was, it's the curve of delusion. So they're on that delusion thinking, I can just keep running and running and running. So how can we kind of help them and slow them down and encourage them to invest in themselves? If anyone else has a better answer for Harriet, please do put it in the chat. So then how can we apply this quadrant to our people? Well, I think you can sort of think about the same sort of things. So whether it's physical things, so is it gym subsidies? I know these are more of the tactical things, the bike to work, maybe setting up a scenario where if everyone's working remotely, let's all do an artificial commute where we have to work 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the afternoon as if we're commuting to or from work. Mental, obviously, how can we support people's development? Put in place career planning, give people the opportunity to follow interests that excite them. Ensure that managers are talking about, coaching them about what sort of things they can do to further their careers. Emotional, I think there's quite a lot here, which is quite key. This whole sense of belonging and inclusion and people feeling part of something. So you know, in a more hybrid environment and taking into account the the earlier link that Steve shared, people feel a little bit less connected. How can we increase that connectivity, make more effort to do that in terms of that belonging there? Social events, employee voice, make sure managers are giving a real team feeling, because you can't necessarily do it as an HR professional in a large business. You can't do it on your own, but a manager can create a great team spirit and a team culture. So making sure that the managers are doing that. And then more holistic stuff is, what can we do, thinking more about rethinking it. What are the stresses? Can we do something about giving people certainty in terms of the contracts or their workloads or those sort of things? Financial counselling, hardship funds, EAR, and actually, do we have a sense of psychological safety in our organisation, in that people don't feel they're going to get shot down if they make a mistake or they take a risk? So it's really how fearful people are. Can we remove fear for people? And also nonsense stresses, bureaucracy, policies. You could ask people, what stresses you out that doesn't need to be there in our organisation? Can we do it? Can we change it? So those are the sort of things that I would think about. So just two final slides. I said we'll send these out to you. These are more, I'm not going to read out every one of them, but they might be things that are useful for you. And we've also got some infographics. I know we've got a topic flyer as well, which has got links to different resources. So there might be things that you can use with your people. So if we're going to manage our own stress, what sort of things do? We relax, make time to do it, eat well, sleep well, don't overthink things. We are organised in terms of we set and keep small goals. Don't get wound up too easily, manage time efficiently, have a strong support system, live according to values, and have a good sense of humour, have a good laugh now and then. That's a great stress reliever. And then line managers, encourage them to support people's well-being, really about being human, be open, act as a coach. So it's not about you solving well-being for others. You can't solve it, but actually, can you help people to do more in terms of those? Don't blame, create psychological safety, and encourage and expect positive habits, that the expectation that people are going to take responsibility for themselves there. Okay, so that's the end of the content. If anyone's got any additional, thank you for being so interactive in the chat. I know probably some people have got to disappear because it's due to finish at 1:45. Do feel free to add comments in the chat. Our next three rethinking topics, we're talking about culture, organisational change and organisational development. We do one every month. And there's various resources that we will send out to you that will be coming your way in terms of these, in terms of that. So